It really does feel like the trans equivalent of like Birth of a Nation. All right, let's go ahead and discuss Fatal Games.
Take it all the way. Take it to the limit and don't look back now. Take it all the way. No second chance, you're on your own now.
Yeah, let's do a quick unboxing first. You have this artwork, which I actually really like. I think it is sick. You have this kind of imagery that will perhaps make more sense once you've seen the film. You do have original poster art, original reversible art, which I really like. Then just the one disc, and you have your slip art as the reversible. I also have the alternate slipcover because it was the April Fool's Day surprise slip. So I think it's fun. It has the kind of retro video game type of look to it. And there's that. And you like play a game or some shit? I don't know. Yeah, it's a little scratch off game that you can play that I have not touched because I will be selling this. I cannot meaningfully discuss this film without spoiling it, so there's gonna be a time code here where you can just skip to our discussion on the Prophecy trilogy if you don't want this spoiled for you. If you've already seen it, or you just don't really care about having shitty 80s slashers spoiled for you, let's go ahead and proceed, right? So Fatal Games is about these high schoolers that are training to be Olympic athletes. They have, I'm not going to pretend to know how sports work, so bear with me, but they have essentially advanced far enough such that they are going to be training for the Olympics, I guess, something like that. So we've got people doing like gymnastics, they've got javelin throwing, they've got all sorts of stuff going on, right? And unfortunately for them, a mysterious killer is killing these students, these athletes, with a javelin, kind of one by one, and they have to kind of get to the bottom of it and everything, right? It's got a fun score to it, I will say that. The conceit is at least interesting and unique. It's kind of boring, honestly, but it is more or less fairly entertaining throughout most of its runtime. And like I said, the kill scenes are especially unique and kind of entertaining. There's tons and tons of like weird, maybe not weird, I don't know. There's a lot of gratuitous nudity to this as well. It is weird because the characters are high schoolers, but you know, obviously the actors are all adults and you come to expect this kind of thing. It does feel particularly egregious in this regard. There's a massage scene that is particularly graphic. There is a chase scene where the killer is chasing one of these students and she's just fully naked running through the school for a while. There's a lot of scenes kind of taking place in women's locker rooms with lots of women taking showers. To be fair, they do the same thing in the men's locker room, though it is not nearly as often, and you really just see a couple bare butts. You don't get to see any hog in this one, which is perhaps unfortunate. Yeah, there's just a ton of gratuitous nudity in this one, and I've delayed it long enough, so let's go ahead and talk about the ending or the twist to this film. If you've been watching my videos long enough and you know the types of tropes that I find to be irritating, unoriginal, and problematic, you could probably guess this one a mile away. Now, we've discussed on this channel fucking more than once at this point the trope of the killer being a woman, but it turns out that she's actually a man, right? Like, she's just dressing up as a woman, and she may or may not actually be transgender, but like, that's the idea. You're like, oh, that's so weird, that's so scary. It's a man dressed as a woman killing people. This is, of course, particularly pernicious and problematic in today's political climate and discourse, given that one of the main driving factors of transphobia is this idea that men are pretending to be women to invade women's spaces, but also to inflict violence upon them, whether that be sexual or otherwise. This one is, because I've seen quite a few films with this trope, right? There's like The Silence of the Lambs and Sleepaway Camp and Dressed to Kill. I'm sorry if I just spoiled all those films for you, but like, those I think are defensible and reclaimable to certain extents, depending on your own relationship to this issue and your own willingness to grant a little bit of charity It's a little bit of charitability to the writers on this, right? This, however, I don't see as being defensible even a little bit, and it feels actively harmful in a way that the rest of them haven't been. Like this, I said this in my Letterboxd review, and if this is kind of an extreme analogy, I'm sorry. I'm really not, though. Like, it really, it really does feel like the trans equivalent of like Birth of a Nation, where in that film, the entire purpose of it is to show Black people at their most like violent stereotypes and using white actors to portray that, right? The whole point is to like be propaganda about how Black people are dangerous and they need to be curtailed, right? That's the whole point of Birth of a Nation, despite what people may tell you. That film is racist as fuck. This feels like it's doing a similar thing for the trans community. Now I'm gonna say, Birth of a Nation is absolutely on purpose. That is explicitly the point of the film. I don't think that this was written to be. If this came out today, like, no shot. This is like Daily Wire shit. But like, in the context that it came out in, I don't think that this was necessarily like coming from a place of hatred for transgender people, but the way it plays out is just as harmful, I think. I realize now I'm not actually described the twist, so I might not be making a lot of sense. But essentially, the school nurse, I guess, who is a woman and who, helps these girls out throughout and helps the students out, is actually a trans woman, and they say this pretty explicitly. She has had bottom surgery and everything, and essentially she is killing these students because she was disqualified from the Olympics because it literally has a newspaper where it says that like there was a botched sex change surgery or whatever, and so she was disqualified for having levels of male hormones that were not acceptable to be competing against women, right? And because of this perceived slight against her or whatever, his motivation truly doesn't make any sense. But she's killing all the students so that, I guess, so that they can't compete either. This kind of like spite-driven homicidal behavior. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, but that in and of itself, whatever. But there's a few details here that I need to address. First of all, when we first discover this, they pitch down her voice such that, she's supposed to sound like a man, like that's her real voice, which is not how this works. But also, like, she sounds like a monster, like this kind of like weird, garbled, hyper deep, like voice that she has when she's like screaming and like chasing the final girl around with the javelin. It is quite literally like designed to make a trans woman look and feel monstrous. There's also a scene early on where she is giving the same character a massage, and the student is fully naked, right? And she's giving her this massage, but it gets to the point where she like starts feeling up her genitals and she starts being like really inappropriate and creepy. And like as I was watching that scene, I was like, that's weird. I don't much care for that. Like that, it already felt kind of homophobic. Because I hope I get this right, but I believe this is the same character that has a girlfriend and is a lesbian in the film. I hope I got that right. If not, I'm sorry. The point still stands that it's weird, right? And it's like super predatory, disgusting behavior. But it's especially pernicious when we learn that she's a trans woman and the scene is portrayed as like a man feeling up underage women and like sexually assaulting them because they have like tricked them into being in that same space and in that position of intimacy and trust, right? Anyway, the film was fine up until then. I was not like in love with it or anything. I was just like, okay, it's fine. Like it's kind of boring. I'm kind of struggling to pay attention, but like I like the aesthetic of it. I like the vibe. I like the kills. There's a lot of things to like about it, and I think I could like it more upon a rewatch. But when that ending happened, I was just kind of horrified, and it was a little bit upsetting, I have to be honest. And like some of that is not necessarily their fault. Like they have predicted a lot of really toxic genocidal discourse that is going on today. And I don't think they can be held responsible for that or necessarily know that that's where the conversation was headed. But There's something that feels especially dangerous about it, given the state of the discourse in this country right now. Anyway, I landed on a 4 out of 10 for this one. I haven't decided if I'm going to sell it yet. I'm definitely selling the slipcover, but I don't know. I could see myself rewatching it, knowing what's going to happen and maybe appreciating it more. And the features on it are good, but I might just get rid of it for now. And if I decide I want to get it again, I can always get it again, right? Anyway, onto the special features. There's a commentary track with Bill Ackerman and Amanda Reyes. They are always excellent. They come super prepared and are just like, there's not a lull or a dull moment in their commentary. They are jam-packing information front to back, right? They had maybe the most interesting insight out of any of the features in that they kind of explained, like they acknowledged that the twist is like super problematic and like fucked up and looks really bad in the context of today. But their take on the twist is that it has more to do with Cold War era tensions of the time rather than an actual comment on trans athletes or trans people. Like right now, it's impossible to watch that and not feel like they are making a comment about how trans women are men invading women's spaces to cheat and to harm biological women, right? Like that's the takeaway when you watch it today, given the discourse right now. But the discourse at the time was about Cold War tensions as it relates to the Olympics, right? So essentially what happened was, as more female athletes from Eastern European countries started to compete, Western audiences started cooking up conspiracy theories about them, as they were more masculine looking and less like hyper feminine than Western audiences were accustomed to seeing in women or in athletes. And so they started cooking up these conspiracy theories about how these like communist countries were actually sending men dressed as women to like cheat and get a leg up in this kind of proxy war kind of event of like competition between countries, right? I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's still not great, right? It's interesting, but yeah, I don't know. I don't see that there's a way to get around it. Even if it's not intentionally transphobic, it absolutely is, right? But I definitely recommend listening to that commentary if you enjoyed the film, or if you just want to get more information on it, or maybe revisit it with some more context, right? Next is an interview with the actress Tracy Helberg. She played the lead, and she said that she agreed to do nudity, but her agent like freaked out and said absolutely not. There was a scene where she was supposed to be doing her like gymnast routine completely nude, which would have been very uncomfortable and not made a lot of sense and would have been fairly gratuitous, but she said she was willing to do it. And there is conflicting reports as to whether or not that scene was actually shot. But in terms of her massage scene, Linnea Quigley was a last minute kind of body double for that sequence. And she is a real gymnast, by the way. They hired her because she could do all the moves for real, and also she was a decent actress. So she says that the transgender aspect was ahead of its time. She's not wrong, but she says that a little bit too neutrally for me. And then she said nice things about Vinegar Syndrome at the end of the interview, which was nice. Next is an interview with the actor Sean Masterson. He says that he only got the part because he had blonde hair and they wanted him to match the love interest. Like it was between him and this other guy who had brown hair. And that's what did it, right? He says that the director didn't like horror films and would try to get the like bloody bits of the script shot in as little takes as possible so they could move on. And he says that the actress for the transgender nurse was absolutely livid that they pitched her voice down after the reveal. And at the premiere, she was like visibly upset and like left the theater because she felt that it like ruined her performance in that moment. And he said that he tried to comfort her and say that she was still like very obviously the best actor in the whole film. Next is an interview with the actor Michael O'Leary. He says that during his death scene, there was some contention as the director wanted him to put the javelin end in his mouth and then fall down the stairs. And he was like, bro, I'm going to choke on that. Like, you do it. What the fuck? And after some perhaps argument and additional contention, he finally did it. And then it didn't even end up in the film. There's an interview with the actress Melissa Prophet, and then there's an interview with the actress Spice Williams Crosby. She said that she went to practice her lesbian kiss scene, but the other actress said that they couldn't do it. So, I don't know. They ended up settling on what's in the film, where they are touching each other a lot, and it's rather intimate, but they're not kissing, right? And then finally, there's an interview with the editor and associate producer, Jonathan Braun. He received the associate producer credit for a pay cut of $1,000 a week. I guess that is a financial contribution in some respect, right? And he said he wanted to be a cinematographer, but was incidentally better at editing, so he got work doing that. But he did end up directing the underwater scene, which is, in my opinion, the best scene in the film. It is really beautiful and really unique and creative and just really fucking cool looking. He says that the director would make a lot of decisions using pickup sticks. And he says that he wanted the music played backwards, and he had to be like, bro, no, that's not going to work. That's fucking stupid. So that's Fatal Games. I don't know. I don't recommend it, but if you're a fan of the film, or if you have a morbid curiosity for what I've just described, it's a good release. I'll say that. And the features are good, but yeah. I think that's enough on Fatal Games. Remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye. I'd like to take a moment to thank our newest patrons: Caroline, Karma Popo, Just the Discs, Lacey Silberman, Leona, Michael Hutchins, Nicholas, Noel, Paige, and Phil P. I'd also like to thank our accomplices: Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Carlin Cook, Deanna Vave, The Disconnected, Dustin Putman, George Strang, Julie Humphreys, Nosferatu 1334, Peppa Crab, Sasha Bobashasaurus, and Stephen Perkins. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.